Deep in the mountains of Lebanon, carved from stone that defies every principle of ancient engineering, stands a mystery that has haunted archaeologists for over a century. The massive temple complex of Baalbek contains blocks of stone so impossibly large, so perfectly cut, and so precisely placed that they challenge everything we think we know about human capability in the ancient world. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. The largest stones in this complex, known as the trilithon, weigh over 800 tons each. That's the equivalent of moving 200 modern automobiles stacked on top of each other. And they're positioned 20 feet above ground level, fitted together with surgical precision that wouldn't allow you to slip a piece of paper between the joints. Modern cranes struggle to lift loads half that weight. The largest mobile crane in the world today can barely manage 1,200 tons under perfect conditions. Yet somehow, people working with primitive tools over 2,000 years ago not only quarried these megalithic stones, but transported them across rough terrain and lifted them into their current positions with mathematical perfection. The questions this raises are staggering. How did ancient builders accomplish what our most advanced technology can barely replicate today? What knowledge did they possess that we've somehow lost? And perhaps most disturbing of all, what if the conventional timeline of human technological development is completely wrong? This isn't just about impressive stonework. This is about a fundamental crack in the foundation of recorded history. A crack that, when examined closely, reveals something so extraordinary that it forces us to reconsider the very nature of ancient civilization. The official archaeological explanation feels almost insulting to common sense. We're told that thousands of workers using copper tools, wooden rollers, and sheer determination somehow managed to create what modern engineering considers nearly impossible. They supposedly spent decades chiseling these massive blocks from solid bedrock, then used ramps and pulleys to move them into position. But when you examine the precision of the cuts, the smoothness of the surfaces, and the mathematical accuracy of the placement, this explanation crumbles under scrutiny. These aren't rough-hewn stones shaped by primitive tools. These are precision-engineered blocks that appear to have been cut by some form of advanced machinery. The surface finish on these stones rivals what we achieve today with diamond wire saws and computer-controlled cutting equipment. The edges are so straight they could serve as reference lines for modern construction. The corners meet at perfect 90-degree angles. This level of precision requires technology, not just manpower and determination. And then there's the quarry itself, located nearly half a mile away from the temple complex. Here lies the most baffling piece of evidence yet discovered. Still attached to the bedrock sits an unfinished stone block known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. This monolith weighs an estimated 1,000 tons and shows clear evidence of having been intentionally shaped and prepared for removal. Walking around this massive stone, you can see tool marks that suggest some form of mechanical cutting process. The surfaces are smooth and uniform in a way that contradicts every known ancient stoneworking technique. Whatever created these cuts worked with a speed and precision that human hands simply cannot achieve, no matter how skilled or numerous. But the Stone of the Pregnant Woman isn't even the largest block in the quarry. In recent years, archaeologists have uncovered an even more massive stone, weighing an estimated 1,650 tons. This block, if it had been successfully moved, would have been the largest worked stone in human history. Yet there it sits, abandoned as if the builders simply vanished in the middle of their work. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond impressive engineering. They suggest the existence of a lost technology, a capability that surpasses our current understanding of what was possible in the ancient world. We're not just looking at skilled craftsmanship here, we're looking at evidence of knowledge and tools that seem to belong to a different era entirely. Consider the logistics alone. Moving an 800-ton stone block requires more than just muscle power and wooden rollers. You need detailed knowledge of physics, engineering principles that weren't supposedly discovered until centuries later. You need to understand load distribution, structural stress, and the mathematical relationships that govern massive construction projects. The builders of Baalbek possessed this knowledge. They applied it with a precision that suggests not just theoretical understanding, but practical experience with moving stones of this magnitude. This wasn't their first attempt or a lucky accident. This was the work of people who had mastered technologies that we're only beginning to rediscover. And here's where the mystery deepens even further. Baalbek wasn't built in isolation. Around the world, we find similar megalithic structures that display the same impossible precision, the same massive scale, and the same technological sophistication. From the perfectly fitted stones of Sacsayhuaman in Peru to the massive trilithons of Stonehenge, there appears to have been a global civilization capable of moving and placing stones that challenge our modern capabilities. But according to conventional archaeology, these sites were built by completely separate cultures with no contact between them. We're asked to believe that multiple civilizations around the world independently developed identical advanced stoneworking techniques, then mysteriously lost this knowledge without leaving any record of how it was accomplished. This explanation requires us to accept an extraordinary series of coincidences, that separate groups of people, working with supposedly primitive tools, all achieved the same level of precision that we struggle to match today. That they all chose to work with impossibly heavy stones when smaller blocks would have been far easier to manage. That they all developed identical construction techniques without any form of communication or shared knowledge. The pattern becomes even more striking when you examine the construction methods in detail. At site after site around the world, we find the same characteristics. Massive stones fitted together without mortar, surfaces polished to mirror-like smoothness, and cutting techniques that show no evidence of the tool marks we would expect from copper or Bronze Age technology. It's as if these sites were all built according to the same technical specifications, following the same engineering principles, using the same advanced methods. The consistency is so remarkable that it suggests not separate developments, but a single source of knowledge, a unified technology that was applied across vast distances and different cultures. Yet, conventional history insists these similarities are mere coincidence. We're told that human ingenuity naturally leads to similar solutions, that the apparent technological sophistication is just the result of skilled craftsmanship and determination. But this explanation fails to address the most fundamental question of all. If ancient people possessed the knowledge and capability to create these megalithic structures, why did they suddenly stop? Why did this advanced stoneworking technology disappear so completely that we have no records of how it was accomplished? Why did subsequent civilizations struggle with construction projects that were apparently routine for their predecessors? The answer to these questions lies not in our assumptions about ancient capabilities, but in our willingness to consider possibilities that challenge the conventional timeline of human development. The evidence at Baalbek suggests that we're not looking at the achievements of primitive people who somehow exceeded their technological limitations. We're looking at the remnants of a sophisticated civilization whose capabilities we've systematically underestimated. This isn't about aliens or supernatural intervention. This is about recognizing that human history might be far more complex and technologically advanced than we've been led to believe. The stones of Baalbek stand as silent witnesses to a lost chapter of human achievement, one that forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about our past. The evidence becomes even more compelling when we examine the precision of the stone joints at Baalbek. These aren't rough approximations fitted together with mortar and hope. These are cuts so accurate that modern laser measurement equipment can barely detect variations in the surface planes. The blocks interlock with a complexity that would challenge contemporary architects using computer-aided design software. Walk along the foundation walls of the Temple of Jupiter and run your hand across the joints between these massive stones. You'll find surfaces so perfectly matched that they create an almost seamless wall. This level of precision requires more than skill and patience. It demands measurement tools and cutting equipment that can maintain accuracy across surfaces measuring dozens of feet in length. But here's what makes this even more extraordinary. These precision cuts weren't made on small, manageable pieces that could be worked on a bench or platform. These cuts were executed on stones weighing hundreds of tons, blocks so massive that they couldn't be easily repositioned or adjusted during the cutting process. Every measurement had to be perfect the first time. The mathematical complexity involved in creating these joints suggests knowledge of geometric principles that weren't supposedly formalized until much later in human history. The angles, the load-bearing calculations, the structural engineering required to ensure these massive stones would remain stable for millennia. This wasn't trial and error construction. This was precision engineering applied on a scale that defies explanation. And then there are the lifting techniques. Modern structural engineers have attempted to recreate the processes that would be required to position these stones at their current height. The calculations are staggering. Even with contemporary hydraulic systems and computer-controlled machinery, lifting an 800-ton block to a height of 20 feet requires extensive preparation, specialized equipment, and multiple safety systems. Yet the builders of Baalbek accomplished this feat repeatedly, positioning multiple massive stones with perfect alignment and structural integrity. They did this without the benefit of steel cables, hydraulic pumps, or electronic control systems. Whatever method they employed, it was sophisticated enough to achieve results that modern technology can barely replicate. The quarrying process presents its own set of impossible questions. Removing stones of this magnitude from solid bedrock requires understanding the internal structure of the rock formation, knowledge of stress points, and natural fracture lines. The quarry at Baalbek shows evidence of controlled separation techniques that suggest the builders could predict exactly how the stone would break and where the cuts needed to be made. This level of geological knowledge implies centuries of experience working with stone on this scale. Yet according to conventional timelines, this technology appeared suddenly, was used to create a handful of megalithic sites, and then vanished completely from the archaeological record. The knowledge wasn't passed down, wasn't recorded, and wasn't applied to later construction projects. The abandonment of the technology is perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the entire mystery. If ancient people possessed the capability to work with 1,000-ton stones, why did subsequent generations struggle with projects involving much smaller blocks? Why did construction techniques appear to regress rather than advance over time? Archaeological sites from later periods show clear evidence of declining stoneworking capabilities. The precision decreases, the scale becomes more modest, and the engineering sophistication diminishes. It's as if the knowledge required to create places like Baalbek simply evaporated, leaving later builders to work with primitive techniques and much smaller stones. This pattern of technological regression appears at megalithic sites around the world. The earliest phases show the most advanced construction techniques, while later additions and repairs display cruder workmanship and smaller stones. The progression moves backward rather than forward, contradicting every model of technological development we understand. The implications extend beyond just stoneworking techniques. The mathematical knowledge required for these projects suggests understanding of physics and engineering principles that weren't supposedly discovered until the Renaissance. Load calculations, structural stress analysis, the geometric relationships necessary to ensure stability over thousands of years. This wasn't intuitive craftsmanship. This was applied science. Yet we have no records of this knowledge, no text describing the techniques, no gradual development of these capabilities through trial and error. The technology appears fully formed in the archaeological record, is applied to create a few extraordinary sites, and then disappears as completely as it arrived. The scientific precision extends to the astronomical alignments built into these structures. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek is oriented with mathematical accuracy to celestial events, suggesting knowledge of astronomy that rivals modern understanding. The builders didn't just move massive stones, they positioned them according to complex calculations involving planetary movements and stellar positions. This astronomical knowledge required sophisticated observation techniques and mathematical tools that could track celestial movements over extended periods. The precision of these alignments suggests not just casual observation of the sky, but detailed understanding of celestial mechanics that wouldn't be formalized by mainstream science until thousands of years later. The more we examine the evidence at Baalbek, the more clear it becomes that we're not dealing with primitive people who somehow exceeded their limitations through determination and ingenuity. We're looking at the remnants of a technological capability that surpassed our current understanding of what was possible in the ancient world. The question isn't whether humans could have built these structures. The question is which humans built them, when they lived, and what happened to their knowledge and technology. The conventional timeline places these achievements in an era when such capabilities shouldn't have existed. But the evidence suggests that our assumptions about ancient technological development might be fundamentally flawed. What if the builders of Baalbek represented not primitive ancestors struggling with basic tools, but representatives of a sophisticated civilization whose achievements we've systematically minimized and misunderstood? What if the technological regression we observe in later periods wasn't the normal progression of human development, but evidence of a catastrophic loss of knowledge and capability? Decapability? The evidence pointing toward a lost technological capability becomes even more disturbing when we examine the tool marks left behind on these massive stones. Under microscopic analysis, the cutting surfaces at Baalbek reveal characteristics that don't match any known ancient tool technology. The cuts are too clean, too uniform, and show none of the irregular patterns we would expect from copper or bronze implements. Modern experiments attempting to recreate these cuts using period-appropriate tools have failed to produce anything approaching the same level of precision. Even with the hardest bronze implements and unlimited time, researchers cannot achieve the mirror-like surfaces found on the Baalbek stones. The cutting pattern suggests the use of technology that could maintain consistent pressure and speed across enormous surface areas. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery lies in the acoustic properties of the temple complex itself. Recent sound analysis has revealed that the massive stone blocks create resonant frequencies when subjected to specific vibrations. The stones appear to have been positioned not just for structural integrity, but to create a complex acoustic system that amplifies and modifies sound waves in ways that seem almost impossible to achieve by accident. These acoustic properties suggest that the builders possessed knowledge of sound engineering that wouldn't be understood by mainstream science until the development of modern acoustics. They didn't just pile stones on top of each other. They created a sophisticated resonance chamber using blocks weighing hundreds of tons as the primary components. The precision required to achieve these acoustic effects adds another layer of complexity to an already impossible engineering challenge. Not only did the builders need to cut, transport, and position massive stones with mathematical accuracy, they also needed to understand how the placement of each block would affect the overall sound characteristics of the structure. This level of integrated design thinking suggests planning capabilities that extend far beyond what we attribute to ancient civilizations. The builders weren't just solving immediate construction problems, they were implementing a comprehensive design that incorporated structural, mathematical, and acoustic elements into a unified system. And then there's the question of the workforce itself. Moving stones of this magnitude would require coordination between thousands of workers operating with split-second timing. Any mistake in communication or execution could result in catastrophic failure and massive loss of life. Yet there's no evidence of the extensive safety systems and backup procedures that would be essential for such dangerous operations. Modern construction projects involving heavy lifting require elaborate safety protocols, multiple redundant systems, and constant communication between all team members. The builders of Baalbek somehow managed to execute far more dangerous operations without leaving any trace of the massive infrastructure that such projects would require. The absence of evidence for construction camps, tool manufacturing sites, or the extensive quarry roads that would be necessary to transport these stones suggests either that all trace of this infrastructure has mysteriously vanished, or that the construction methods were fundamentally different from what we assume. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys around the Baalbek complex have revealed geometric patterns beneath the surface that don't correspond to any known archaeological features. These subsurface anomalies show regular, artificial patterns that extend far beyond the visible temple foundations. Whatever lies buried beneath Baalbek appears to be much larger and more complex than the structures we can see above ground. The radar signatures suggest chambers, corridors, and geometric spaces that were either carved from bedrock or constructed using the same massive stone technology visible in the temples above. If these subsurface features are confirmed through excavation, they would indicate that the visible temple complex represents only a small fraction of the original construction. The implications are staggering. We may be looking at just the uppermost levels of a vast underground complex built using the same impossible stone moving techniques. The builders didn't just create impressive temples. They may have constructed an entire subterranean city using blocks that weigh more than modern buildings. The stones of Baalbek refused to surrender their secrets easily. Every answer we uncover leads to 10 more questions that shake the very foundations of what we think we know about our past. These massive blocks stand as silent sentinels guarding a truth that challenges every assumption about ancient human capability and the timeline of technological development. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is that we may be living in the shadow of a civilization whose achievements we can barely comprehend, let alone replicate. The precision, the scale, the mathematical sophistication embedded in these stones suggests knowledge that was somehow lost to time, leaving us to wonder not just how they did it, but who they really were. The evidence at Baalbek forces us to confront a disturbing possibility. What if the story of human progress isn't the steady upward climb we've been taught? What if we're actually the inheritors of a broken world, struggling to understand technologies that once seemed routine to our predecessors? The abandoned stones in the quarry seem to whisper a question that echoes through the centuries. If they could move mountains, why did they stop?